Welcome to Work It Out with TeKay Brown Taylor. She's an HR powerhouse and certified mediator in the CSRA. Conflict is everywhere, in our homes, our day-to-day transactions, and especially in the workplace, where good HR processes and policies can fall short. Save time, save money. Don't rush to litigate, mediate. Visit brownstonemediation.com. Now here's TeKay and Neil.
Well, we're picking up where we left off last time, the top 10 HR mistakes that small businesses make. Number 4, poor training. So they've come aboard, hopefully been onboarded, but what are some examples of poor training?
Well, you mentioned onboarding, and since that's out the gate, and it is a form of training, that's where a lot of issues start, is onboarding in a way that really sets the new employee up for success.
Is there a time period that you should take to onboard them, and should you involve other staff members?
It's great because that's creative. Imagine if TK's doing all the talking, at some point I'm going to get boring. Blah, 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 blah. But if Neil and others come in around the organization and talk about their experience, so it creates a little flair, a little difference, a little energy. So yes, I do think a great way is to include other staff, but there's no one way. Every organization is going to be different. It's important to establish and develop a good onboarding process. And I was just mentioning onboarding at a business roundtable, and a leader who had just transitioned to another company was sharing his experience when I was explaining how important onboarding is, and it's a missed opportunity for organizations. And he gave his example, and it was so, an example that I see often is that he said he was sat at a computer, and that was his onboarding experience. His hiring manager came in the door, welcomed him to the company, and that was the first and last time he saw him that week.
Oh no. And
so he talked a great deal about just his onboarding experience and how it really put him in the mindset of, what did I just do? And he was already willing to leave the company before he even started. And so onboarding is so critical, it's so important, because it really allows you as the employer to ground the new employee and help them determine how they fit into the organization, introduction to the new employees, to the team, to what to do, what not to do. It really sets them into, and what I believe, being loyal to your company. It becomes more than just a job that they just got hired for.
Mm-hmm. What do you share with your clients about the importance of communication and training, and where are there mistakes or gaps?
Yeah, well, when you talk about communication and training, everything is about communication, mm-hmm. right? Everything, not just training. But training is so important, one, from the job perspective. I can't meet your expectation if I don't know exactly the way we do it here in company A. Because although company B did what we did, and I have those skills to do in company A, it might not be the exact way company A needs it done. And so training allows us to make the skill fit the way we need it, right? And so being able to even communicate and have, because communication comes through setting the job expectation, being open, being transparent, being straightforward, dealing with the personality style, all those different things are in that envelope around communication as it relates to that training piece, if you will, and the need for training, and what training and how training will look, and when we do training, and who needs training, sort of thing.
Is it one size fits all, or do you think employees have different levels of expectations with training?
Of course, they do. There is not one size fits all. And I would even say, encourage, is that we need a mix of training. The training where we just go and check the box and make sure you got the knowledge. That's not a very robust way of doing training, but it does meet a need. And so I wouldn't say throw that out, because there are times where I just need to know that you, Neil, know that this training exists and that you have a space and a place to go get those skills when they're needed. But when I want the training and the content to stick, I need to be a little more robust. I need to make it a little more experiential, meaning the employee or trainee is engaging with that content. And the more we engage with the content, the better it will stick and the better it will be more applicable. And so we need to have a mix of training. We need to do the in-person. We need to do the online. We need to do maybe, some scenario-based. And so there's certainly not one size fits all, because the way a company of 100 or 50 will train different than a company of 4 or 5 or 1 or 2.
And do you craft training programs as part of your outsourcing efforts?
Absolutely. Every training and facilitation that we do is customized for that particular organization. So before we even begin to implement a training, we sit down and we meet with the leaders. What is it that you need? What goal are we trying to accomplish? What are the outcomes of this particular training? And then we take into that particular organization. Because again, every organization looks different and their needs are different. And so everything is customized specifically based on the outcome. What is the desired outcome of that particular training effort?
All right, when we come back, the next hiring mistake will keep you out of court. Legal interview questions. That's some typical mistakes that are being made. And TeKay will be right back with her insight on that.
You're listening to Work It Out with TeKay Brown Taylor from Brownstone Mediation Services. Family, business, your workplace. What is conflict costing you? Visit brownstonemediation.com to see how you can find a resolution and maybe even a reconciliation of a broken relationship. That's brownstonemediation.com.
Well, mistake number 5, illegal interview questions. You're trying to keep your clients out of court, aren't you?
I am.
Have you heard of some situations where some things were asked that maybe shouldn't have been?
Yes, all the time.
Really?
Yes.
What is the most out there illegal question you think you've heard in the last few years?
The most out there. Well, the one that was recent and just came to mind was we were doing some interviews, and actually I was a part of the interview, and the chair of the interview panel, the senior leader of the interview panel, asked the candidate about where their parents were from.
That seems like a normal
It seems
question.
like very normal.
Yeah.
And of course that conversation went into this discussion around ethnicity.
Oh, that's not normal.
And so the concern and the issue is if that candidate is not successful, he or she could then say it was because of my ethnicity. Although you as the employer know that's not true.
Right.
And why all these other things we talked about, meaning documenting, having job descriptions, and knowing exactly what you're looking for in a candidate, having all that very clear and upfront will help channel and protect from some of that. But we want to be clear and stay job focused. Stay on the expectations of the job. When you get into all these Title VII illegal discrimination cases, now you're opening that window for trouble when you start talking about race, color, religion, sexual orientation, national, origin. The concern is that now what you intended in conversation is in the interview, in the space of an interview, and it can be used against you, unfortunately.
Any other interview questions you think should be taboo or you should maybe stay away from, kind of like that? If you're if you're talking to a sharp guy and you want to learn about their family a little bit, would you ask about the spouse? Would you ask about the spouse's employment? Is that okay?
I don't want to give a blanket yes or no, is because it needs to be in a way that's not tied to something that could be in the potential of it being illegal, meaning around these protected classes. And so you could have conversations. We are here in Augusta, and if it's around the masters, me and my spouse, me and my wife, we attended the masters, and you get into them, so you know that person has a spouse. And so there's ways to do it. But again, going and staying focused on the job. Mm-hmm. What do we need the candidate for? How can you assess in that interview their qualities, their skills, their fit for the job and fit for the company? And so it's really great and important that you work with professionals, work with your HR folks to help establish the type of interview questions. That's what I want you to take away is,
okay,
you should already know going in what are the interview questions and the questions I need to ask this candidate, and what are the answers that I'm looking for. You should already have an idea, because if you don't have an idea, that's when you get complacent and comfortable and get in trouble, because you don't know what you're looking for.
Sure. And
to your first question was, yes, mental health. An example, I recently had an employer ask, should we ask, if I have concerns about mental health, should I ask about the person's mental health?
Like, what type of medicine are you on? Are you on any anti-anxiety pills?
Asking about therapy and all those different.
No.
And even if the candidate suggests those things, don't let them lead you to a rabbit hole.
Wow.
Pocket it, and because what do you imagine will happen? Is that they are going to say that you didn't hire them because of your concerns with their mental health. Mm-hmm. And so don't give them anything to use against you.
Understood.
Essentially what I'm saying.
And lastly, you mentioned good interview questions. And again, one size doesn't fit all. When you sit down and you get involved in an outsourcing situation, can you help craft interview questions?
Yes, we do. We do that very often. And we like to say job specific and behavioral. How can we establish what behavioral questions elicit the information you need to determine is the person qualified, and is the candidate a good fit for the company? And yes, we can help craft interview questions. Again, going back to knowing what I'm going to ask and what I'm looking for in that ask.
Well, again, number 5, keeping you out of court were the legal interview questions. And number 6, when we come back, compliance issues. Only this time we're talking local, state, and federal. Very, very important. Please stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Work It Out with TeKay Brown Taylor from Brownstone Mediation Services. Family, business, your workplace. What is conflict costing you? Visit brownstonemediation.com to see how you can find a resolution and maybe even a reconciliation of a broken relationship. That's brownstonemediation.com.
HR mistake number 6, compliance issues. Do you find that this is a big one?
Well, it's not the biggest, but it's a concern, absolutely, for organizations, is that when you have people, you have to be compliant.
That's right. And again, this is local, state, and federal. Do you coach hiring managers on the rules, and do they change?
They do. Laws change frequently. There's a lot that are pending right now, and we're waiting for decisions to be made, where the courts have to be involved, or it's in a political space. Where you know where we are politically, and so yes, they change very often. And the key there, you mentioned local, state, and federal, is that local might be different than federal. Mm-hmm. We just had a Juneteenth holiday here in June.
Yes.
It's a federal holiday. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that private companies that are not governmental have to acknowledge that particular federal holiday.
I found that Some companies were open, some were not. Many of the banks were closed, I felt, but it really wasn't across the board.
No, it's a federal mandate. It's a federal holiday as opposed to a state or local.
Yeah. And those are some of the,
And the states and locals do have, so I'm not saying that, but it just means that private entity that are not governmental, not public, have to.
They have a choice.
They have a choice.
I suppose.
So that's just a great example of having a difference between local, state, and federal that.
Sure. Random question for you. I have had a few people over the years that I decided it wasn't the right fit. They didn't necessarily do anything wrong, and I didn't want to hold them up from getting unemployment, but I always wondered, would my rate go up if I had enough of those? And so does that come up in conversation with yourself and employers?
Well, it could, and it's more of that workers' comp insurance and all those different things, and you know how insurance works. Mm-hmm. So it could, but it's a conversation. It's not an automatic. It's who are your insurance through. So all those factors that change and determine that. But that shouldn't be the reason why, as an employer, mm-hmm. you're making the decision as it relates to workers' comp.
Yeah.
Or unemployment in a person getting unemployment. Like mm-hmm. there's other questions that we should be talking about around unemployment.
That's right. And you're right. And there's really big issues like anti-discrimination. And you say those can be mistakes that are made in the continued employment mm-hmm. process. How so? Is it a training thing, or is it just something that we don't deal with as employers?
Well, it's something that we should be aware of and that we should do. And we should ensure that our staff are not doing. And so one of the ways we ensure that our staff are not doing is that we as employers have it on our radar, and that we have programs and training and processes in place to ensure that we are an anti-discrimination organization. That goes back to even your job descriptions. Is it in your job description? Do you have somewhere where equal employer somewhere? And, is it in your employee policies?
Right.
And so it just protects you. It's more of a protection to ensure that you, as an employer, have established processes, have practices, have programs to really support that you are not engaging, your employees are not engaging in discriminatory behaviors.
Mm-hmm. What does training look like from your company to other companies as it relates to that? Is it something that you put together a workshop and you go through it?
Yep, so we can do workshops. We can go in and supplement the already established training. We can modify. It's really customized based on the needs of that particular organization. We do things, we were just talking about anti-discrimination, unlawful discrimination, sexual harassment, all these different things that are under compliance standard. If you get a sexual assault or sexual harassment grievance or complaint and it gets out of the organization and becomes a legal situation, you want to be able to prove as an organization that you have policies in place and that you also have training in place, that you've done some due diligence to as well to ensure that that's not the type of environment your organization consists of.
Mm-hmm. Any other mistakes you notice in compliance issues just through the years that have come up?
Is the lack of doing it. And one is having compliance measures in place, and two is doing it in an effective way. Oftentimes we do it just to check the box, and employees don't see it important. I was an equal opportunity director for a very long time, and we had the joke or running joke was mandatory training. And so that mandatory training, just the attitude around it was not effective. And so we continue to have issues, is because even how you develop a training and how you create the environment and the value around those particular issues will help or hinder how you stay compliant. Is if your employees think of mandatory training, they come up with all these jokes or, around the type of training, then that speaks to how they value and what they think and the importance of it. And so there's work that could be done around the types of training and involving your leaders and your employees, and then even doing assessments, climate assessments around the needs and the types of training that your organization need, because it's going to look different. There are some things that we absolutely need to have, every organization needs to have, which I would say in this space that we are in now is sexual harassment, making sure they know, the Title VII, all those different things, the things that impact leave, Pregnancy Act was just passed, all these different things, is that especially, particularly as leaders and frontline leaders, we need to be aware of and understanding so that the organization can be protected and can be compliant.
And the last piece of that puzzle is mistake number 7, which is the lack of policies and procedures. Out of every 5 companies in our area, and this is just a guess, how many do you think have handbooks and how many do not?
I'm going to say the percentage is on the lower end in the median. Yeah. And reason why I say that, even if for the handbooks that they have, it's something that they just pulled off
the internet,
off Google,
mm-hmm.
and it's not specific to their organization. And so if you have a handbook, and the other issue that I see a lot is the confusion between a handbook and a policy manual. Those are 2 very different things. But going back to the employee handbook is not having it and pulling it from a general source.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be specific to your organization. Because again, we talked and have said a number of times, even in this space, is that organizations look different. And so something that may protect a smaller organization, may protect a larger organization, may not be relevant to a smaller company. And so you need to look and develop policies that are relevant to the makeup of your organization, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense.
What kinds of things do you advise clients that should go into a handbook?
Things around time, your attendance, because attendance is often what people want to walk someone out of the door, is that they don't show up for work or they don't follow the process to show up to work, meaning calling out, leave, how we take leave, what's tolerated, what's not tolerated, meaning things that you can do, can't do. It should be very robust and very comprehensive. And so there's a laundry of things that should be included in an employee handbook, because an employee handbook is the word I wanted to use was contract, but it's really not a contract. It's more like it sets the expectation. It's an agreement. It's an understanding from the employee perspective. It's your, as the employer, expectations of the employment relationship.
Mm-hmm. When you've put together a handbook for a company, how do you disseminate the information?
To share?
Yeah.
So it's a conversation.
Okay.
And so usually I'm not the individual that are disseminating it to the employees.
Okay.
We have, but those are smaller organizations. Mm-hmm. We usually work with the leader that we're working with, is usually the HR professional in the organization. And if it's not established, because oftentimes they will have something if they have an HR manager, but it needs to be robust or it needs to be updated. And that's another issue with the employee handbooks, is we do it and it's one and done. And it really shouldn't be one and done. We really should be looking at those things every year, if not every other year.
A living, breathing document.
Living, breathing document. COVID changed a whole lot. Look at remote work. It changed a whole lot. And so even how the laws change is, are you considering, do you have a pregnancy or a nursing policy in your employee handbook? So Those things have changed. We talked about state, local, state, federal. We should even consider, are there any things, excuse me, on a local, state level that we should include that impacts how our policies, because oftentimes the OSHA, the anti-discrimination, all those things are federal laws usually. And I say, whenever you have employment changes from one, meaning I was self-employed and didn't have employees and I hired my first employee, one, and the changes in employment from 1 to 15 to 20 to 25, 50, and that above 100, all of those numbers are important because at every last one of those numbers, we should be doing something differently.
Well, TeKay can kind of help you with that. Any other lack of policies and procedures that you've seen or anything you would address in terms of mistakes as it relates to a handbook? Anything else?
Well, we talked about a lot of them. One is having one. And it would be a great idea to have the employee handbook, but also have the policy manual, because the policy manual is specifically for how you manage people. That is for the supervisors and the leaders. And then 2, we talked about ensuring, or maybe we didn't say this, ensuring that every employee has an employee handbook, has in a way acknowledged that they've received, and that's a missed opportunity that we don't
Sign it.
Just acknowledge that you received it and that you've reviewed it and that you understand it. You don't have any questions. And of course, it's living and breathing, and so there will maybe questions at some point when issues arise. But review it regularly, meaning it should be. Don't allow it to be a one and done. And I do find that that's an issue that, one, it's non-existent. So that's issue number 1. The second is that we don't review it regularly to ensure that as things are changing, that we're changing with things that impact the way the employee handbook would stand.
And lastly, would you say that's a gap in a lot of companies that they don't have it, and do you preach the importance of it and the exposure that companies may have without either the handbook or the policy manual?
Yeah, I find that larger organizations have it, and I would even say larger organizations are even moving to electronic. It's a part of their HRIS system, or they have it, online somewhere. I would say it's more of an issue of smaller organizations, mid-sized organizations, nonprofits, who may have bylaws, may have policies, may have standard operating procedures, but don't have an employee handbook, and one that's being managed in a way that it's continually being updated and changed, and ensuring that employees have, and things of that nature. So yes.
Well, hire her and her company. You may be making mistakes you don't even know of.
Yes.
We don't know what we don't know.
That's what we want to help you with.
Sometimes. Fantastic. Thanks so much, TeKay, and we'll continue with some more mistakes. We got to finish our top 10 list. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neil.
You've been listening to Work It Out with TeKay Brown Taylor from Brownstone Mediation Services. She's an HR powerhouse and certified mediator in the CSRA, specializing in conflict resolution with family, business, workplace issues, and small claims disputes. Remember, save time, save money. Don't rush to litigate, mediate. Visit brownstonemediation.com.